Hello travelers and welcome back to the tavern. Tonight we travel to Ireland, where we explore urban legends tied to real places and real fear. First, we visit the Hellfire Club in South Dublin, where some say the devil once joined a card game. Then we go to County Cork, where the White Lady is still said to search for her lost husband. Next, we walk through Jervis Street, where people still claim they can hear a ghostly lullaby in the crowd. After that, things get even stranger. The Bishop's Lady is said to appear near the River Shannon in Limerick City. And in a small village, the Moving Statues mystery once brought thousands of people to witness something they could not explain. So, get your favorite drink, sit back, and let's see which of these Irish legends can make the modern world feel haunted.
Jervis Street in Dublin, Ireland sits right in the heart of the city, busy, modern, and full of life. Shops, crowds and noise fill the area every day, yet beneath all of that, there is a history that many people walk past without ever realizing. Because long before the Jervis shopping centre opened in 1996, this ground was home to Jervis Street Hospital, a place that cared for the sick and dying for over 300 years before closing in the 1980s. Many believe that not everything left when the hospital shut its doors. Stories from the area suggest that something still lingers. One of the most well-known accounts came in 2008, when a newsreader from Today FM was walking along Jervis Street in Dublin, Ireland. As she passed the shopping centre, she suddenly heard a woman softly singing a lullaby nearby. At first, she brushed it off and kept walking, but the voice did not fade in a normal way. Instead, it seemed to follow her, growing louder as she moved further away. Shaken by the experience, she later spoke about it on air, and within minutes, others called in with similar encounters. Inside the shopping centre, staff and visitors have shared their own unsettling experiences. Some claim to have seen a woman dressed in an old-fashioned nurse's uniform walking quietly between the stores, only to disappear moments later. Others describe objects moving on their own, including fruit being thrown through the air with no one nearby. There are also stories of direct encounters. Near the bathrooms, one visitor reported being watched by a woman who whispered something he could not understand before vanishing completely. Others have described a different presence, a female figure that seems to appear briefly, leaning close enough to be felt, before disappearing just as quickly. All of these accounts seem to tie back to the same idea, that the land still carries echoes of its past. A hospital is a place filled with intense emotion, fear, hope, loss, and sometimes unfinished stories. Jervis Street in Dublin, Ireland may look like any other busy shopping area, but for those who have experienced something unusual there, it feels like the past never fully moved on. It is the kind of place where even in a crowd, you might not be as alone as you think.
What catches my attention is the contrast between the modern shopping centre and the old hospital history beneath it. Jervis Street feels busy and normal today, which makes the lullaby story even more unsettling. A voice that follows someone through the street is a strange detail, especially since others later reported similar experiences. The nurse figure also fits the location in a natural way, because the site carries a long history of sickness, care, and loss. To me, the strongest part of this case is how the reports seem tied to the place's past, rather than feeling random. I think this story stays memorable because it turns an ordinary city visit into something quietly disturbing.
Charlesfort, a star-shaped fortress overlooking the sea in Kinsale, County Cork, Ireland, is known for its history, but even more for the sorrowful presence said to linger within its walls. Among Ireland's most famous ghost stories is that of the White Lady of Kinsale, a figure tied to love, loss, and a tragedy that still echoes through the fort. The story tells of a young soldier stationed at Charlesfort who married a local girl. After their wedding, the couple stayed inside the fort to celebrate their first night together. Later that same night, the soldier was called to his post for guard duty. Still affected by the day's celebrations, he fell asleep while on watch. At the time, discipline in the military was unforgiving. When other soldiers discovered him asleep, they followed protocol and shot him where he stood. When news reached his bride, the shock and grief were too much to bear. In despair, she climbed the walls of Charlesfort in Kinsale, County Cork, Ireland, and threw herself to her death. Years later, sightings began to spread. Soldiers and their families spoke of a woman in a white dress wandering through the fort. Children seemed to notice her most clearly. In one account, a young girl asked her father who the smiling lady in white was, even though no one else could see her. In another, a nurse claimed to have seen the figure standing quietly beside a sleeping child. Not every encounter has been gentle. Some stories describe a more restless presence. Officers in the fort have reported being pushed downstairs by an unseen force, suggesting that whatever remains there may still carry the weight of that tragic night. The White Lady is not said to be confined only to the fort. In Kinsale, County Cork, Ireland, locals have claimed to see her drifting through the streets, as if searching for something she lost long ago. Charlesfort itself was built between 1677 and 1682 during the reign of Charles II, designed by William Robinson as a coastal defence against naval attacks. It played a role in conflicts such as the Williamite War and remained in military use until 1922. Today it stands partly in ruins, preserved as a national monument since 1973, with sections of its original 17th century structure still visible. Visitors now walk the same grounds where this story is said to have unfolded. The sea stretches out below, the stone walls stand weathered by time, and the silence carries a certain weight. It is the kind of place where one tragic moment seems to have never truly ended, as if the White Lady is still wandering those walls in her wedding dress, unable to leave that night behind.
What stands out to me is how personal this story feels. Charlesfort already had a strong military past, but the White Lady story adds a much deeper emotional layer. The image of the bride walking through the fort in her wedding dress is very powerful, and that may be why the story has lasted so long. I find the reports of children seeing her especially interesting because they make her presence feel calm, while other stories, like officers being pushed, suggest something more restless. To me, this legend is less about fear and more about grief that never found peace. Even if someone does not believe in the ghost, it is easy to see why the story stayed with those old stone walls.
In late July of 1985, the quiet village of Ballinspittle in County Cork, Ireland, became the centre of one of the strangest modern events in Irish history. It began with a single claim. A local resident, heading home one evening, said they saw a roadside statue of the Virgin Mary move on its own. At first, it sounded like something that could easily be dismissed, a trick of the light or tired eyes at dusk. But then more people came forward. Within days, others in Ballinspittle in County Cork, Ireland reported seeing the same thing. The statue appeared to shift, sway, or come to life in subtle ways. Soon, similar claims began emerging from across the country. What started as one story quickly grew into something much bigger, drawing attention from far beyond the village. Crowds began to gather. People travelled from across Ireland and even from abroad, visiting sites where these strange occurrences were said to be happening. Around 30 locations became known for these sightings, and Ballinspittle alone attracted tens of thousands of visitors. Some estimates suggest that up to 100,000 people came to witness what many believed was a divine event. The Catholic Church approached the situation with caution. Some officials expressed doubt, with one bishop openly describing the phenomenon as an illusion. At the same time, others remained more reserved, aware of how deeply such experiences could affect people's faith. Explanations were offered from different perspectives. Psychologists from University College Cork suggested that the effect could be caused by staring at a still object in fading light, where the eyes begin to perceive movement that is not actually there. Anthropologist Peter Mulholland pointed to cultural influences, suggesting that strong religious imagery, especially from childhood, could shape how people interpreted what they were seeing. Even with these explanations, not everyone was convinced. Many who witnessed the events believed they had seen something real, something beyond simple perception. For them, the movement of the statues was a sign, a moment where the ordinary briefly gave way to something sacred. The impact of the events in Ballinspittle in County Cork, Ireland did not fade quickly. In the years that followed, groups formed around the memory of what happened, with some continuing to share and preserve the story even today, reaching as far as other countries. Whether it was illusion, belief, or something that cannot be easily explained, the events of 1985 remain one of the most talked about mysteries in Ireland. It feels like for those who stood there watching, it was a moment that stayed with them long after the statues stood still again.
I think the most important detail is how fast the story grew from one local sighting into a nationwide event. The fact that so many people traveled to County Cork shows how strong belief can become when hope, fear, and curiosity meet in one place. I also find the timing interesting because dusk, strong emotion, and religious expectation can easily shape what people think they see. At the same time, the number of witnesses make it hard to ignore completely. To me, this is one of those cases where the human reaction may be more important than the event itself. Whether it was an illusion or something stranger, it became a rare moment where an entire country seemed to look at the same statue and wonder.
In Limerick City, another story surrounds Thomond Bridge, which crosses the River Shannon. Built in 1836 by James and George Payne, the bridge has long been tied to a darker tale involving two very different figures. One was known as Drunken Thady, a troublesome local man, while the other was the Bishop's Lady, a woman said to live a secret life once night fell. According to the story, the two met on the bridge one night and a violent struggle broke out. The Bishop's Lady tried to push Thady into the river, but when he begged for mercy, the outcome changed. She lost her footing and fell into the water instead, drowning beneath the surface. Since that night, people in Limerick City, Ireland, have claimed that her spirit remains on Thomond Bridge. It is said she waits for those who cross late at night, ready to drag them into the river. Some even believe that her fingerprints can appear on the stone, marking the place where she fought for her life in her final moments. The story became widely known through the work of poet Michael Hogan, who wrote about the event and helped keep it alive through the years.
What makes this interesting to me is how local and dramatic this story feels. The bridge is a real place that people still cross today, which makes the warning about the Bishop's Lady feel more personal. The story follows the shape of a moral tale, with secrecy, violence, panic, and a death that turns into a haunting. I find the detail about the fingerprints on the stone especially interesting, because it gives people something physical to picture. The link to Michael Hogan also helps explain why the story lasted, since poetry can keep a local fear alive for generations. To me, this feels more like a strong river legend than a clear ghost case, but it still leaves a lasting impression.
Perched high above Dublin on Montpelier Hill, the ruins of the Hellfire Club in South Dublin, Ireland have long been surrounded by fear, mystery, and stories that refuse to fade. What stands there today was once a hunting lodge, built in 1725 by William Connolly, a powerful Irish politician and Speaker of the Irish House of Commons. From the very beginning, something about the place felt wrong to locals. Connolly used stones taken from a nearby prehistoric cairn to construct the building, disturbing what many believed to be ancient ground. Not long after, a violent storm tore the roof from the lodge. People whispered that it was no natural event, but punishment from angered spirits for disturbing the site. After Connolly's death in 1729, the lodge became linked to a notorious group known as the Hellfire Club. This secretive society gained a reputation for wild behaviour, excess, and dark practices. It is during this time that the most chilling stories began to take shape. One of the most well-known tales describes a stormy night when members of the club were gathered inside, drinking and playing cards. A cloaked stranger arrived at the door, asking for shelter. They welcomed him in, and the game continued. At some point, one of the players dropped his cards and bent down to pick them up. As he looked under the table, he saw something that froze him in place. A cloven hoof, where the stranger's foot should have been. In that moment, the visitor revealed himself to be the devil. The story says that the building was then consumed by fire, leaving behind the ruins that still stand on Montpelier Hill in South Dublin, Ireland. Other stories paint an equally disturbing picture. One tells of a priest who arrived to find the group attempting to sacrifice a black cat. He intervened and performed an exorcism, releasing a dark force from the animal's body. Another speaks of a young farmer who was invited to witness the club's activities, only to be found the next morning in a state of complete terror, unable to speak ever again. Over the years, visitors and locals have reported strange sounds, unsettling smells, and an overwhelming sense of being watched, especially after dark. The atmosphere around the ruins has kept these stories alive, passed from one generation to the next. The legends do not stop at the hilltop. Nearby, at Killakee House, which sits at the base of Montpelier Hill in South Dublin, Ireland, more strange events have been reported. Built in 1765 by the Connolly family, it later became tied to the same dark reputation. Many believe it is haunted by a large black cat, possibly linked to the same animal from the old rituals. Others claim it is the spirit of a cat that was cruelly burned by members of the club. In the late 1960s, workers renovating the house reported encounters with a black cat with glowing red eyes, experiences that drove some of them to leave the job entirely. Even in modern times, the site has not lost its connection to the supernatural. In 2006, groups gathered there on June 6th, drawn by fears and rumours surrounding the date 666. Yet despite all the darkness tied to it, the Hellfire Club in South Dublin, Ireland remains a place people are drawn to. A short but steep walk through the forest leads to the top, where the ruins overlook the city and the surrounding landscape. The path itself feels quiet and uneasy, as if something could be waiting just out of sight. It is the kind of place where history and legend blur together, and once you stand among the ruins, it is hard not to feel like something there is still watching.
What stands out to me is the location itself. The stolen stones, the storm that tore off the roof, and the story about the devil at the card table all give this place a strong identity in folklore. What I find interesting is that the fear did not stay in one place. The stories spread to nearby areas, including Killakee House and the reports of the black cat. To me, the strongest part is how many people describe the same uneasy feeling around the ruins, even if the supernatural side is hard to prove. I think this story lasts because it mixes real history with the fear of disturbing something ancient. So these were some of Ireland's most unsettling legends, stories where real places and old fears still seem to meet. See you next time.